Merry meet, everyone. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the waxing gibbous moon, as well as the full moon that's approaching on the weekend. And we're also going to dive in and talk about the fifth element spirit. So if you're here with me live, you can always drop any comments or questions into the chat, and I'll get to the questions at the end. So I'm just going to jump right in. So we are in the waxing gibbous moon right now. We're actually nearing the end of it because we do have the full moon arriving on Saturday, early Saturday morning. And so the waxing gibbous moon takes place from about days 9 to 13. So this is right after the first quarter and before the full moon. Now, we notice that there is an accelerated energy during this phase. It's very, very activating for many people. And some might actually find that it's difficult for them to sleep. They may feel a lot of cosmic downloads coming, a lot of really kind of creative energy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But as far as spell work goes during this time, it's interesting to differentiate the waxing moon energy that happens in the crescent, the waxing crescent, versus the waxing gibbous. So now, during this waxing gibbous moon, we can take advantage of that accelerated and amplified active energy. And so spells that are done now, right now, they can manifest very quickly, especially if they're simple and very direct. So just an intention that is very pointed, direct, can do really well right at the waxing gibbous. Now, this is opposed to the waxing crescent, where we still have that energy of manifesting, drawing in, but it's more long-term drawing in. It's that energy isn't quite as active yet. It takes a little bit of time for it to warm up after it moves out of that dark moon, new moon space. So you can kind of think about the intentions that you have. If you have an intention of drawing in, whether it's something that you want it to be a kind of a long-term drawing in, often good for like really bigger things that are going to take some time, or whether you want it to be a quick and activating energy for perhaps like a prosperity spell where you need a small amount of money very quickly. That would be really good in the waxing gibbous. And those are just a few examples. Now, we also have the harvest moon that's arriving with, as I mentioned, there's the full moon arriving on Saturday, and we're going to look at it from two different perspectives. So first of all, it is the harvest moon, so each of the moons of the year has connotations that go with it. This particular one is often called the harvest moon, though it does go by some other names depending on your tradition or the region of the world that you're from. And the energy flow here is really beginning to move into a more restful place. So if you kind of think about just the energy of the wheel of the year in general, each of the moons, they take pieces of that. So when we're here in September at the harvest moon, well, it's a full moon, just like the moon back in February, it's quite a bit different. The energy is quite a bit different. And so this one, as we move more into this equal day and equal night, you've probably been noticing that the sun is rising later, that the sun is setting earlier, so our days are shortening now and our nights are lengthening. As we move into this kind of equal day, equal night time that is going to come around the equinox in a few weeks, we also feel that energy at this moon. So this moon is going to feel, in a lot of ways, like we're in the harvest right now. We're approaching the second of the harvest festival, so we're right in the middle of that harvest time. We're enjoying the fruits of our labor and of the harvest, but at the same time we're doing so with a deep sense of gratitude because we sense the change, the shifting of the energy that's coming, in the fall. So we also can think of this as some people will actually celebrate on the harvest moon. They'll celebrate something like a witch's Thanksgiving. So in the United States, we often think of our Thanksgiving as being, well, we don't often, our Thanksgiving is in November, but many witches actually celebrate their Thanksgiving in September. And there are a lot of reasons for this. I'm not going to get into all of them, but you might celebrate kind of a witch's Thanksgiving on the harvest moons, this full moon this weekend, or some will actually wait until Mabon, which is the equinox coming in a couple of weeks, to do that. Now is the time really to give thanks for everything that the year has provided. We're beginning to move into the fall. Things, the energy starts to shift, right? It's also a good time to give thanks to our patron deities or a deity of your choosing if you work with deities. And, typically work done at the harvest moon might be prosperity, more kind of drawing in of abundance, gratitude, getting ready for the shift as we move further into the dying half of the year. Now, we can also look at this moon from another perspective. So this is the perspective of the sign that the moon is in. So this full moon will be in Pisces. It actually becomes peak at 2:59 a.m. on Saturday morning. This is at Pacific time, and then that would be 5:59 on the Eastern Coast, or on East Coast. And this Pisces moon, this brings in an energy that's very dreamy and creative and spiritual. So you think of all of the aspects that go along with sign Pisces, and we're going to feel some of that during this moon as well. So you don't want to be afraid to really voice your desires, what you want. When we think about manifestation and drawing in and these things that we typically think of at a full moon, we really think about how sound, particularly the sound of our own voice, can help us draw in. And whether this be speaking, singing, chanting, even whispering, just being able to utter something with your voice has a powerful energy of manifestation. So if you think about it, a good number of creation myths actually have a story where a deity speaks creation into existence. We see it across many different cultures. And the thing, if you think about us as a reflection of the divine, as we being a microcosm within the greater macrocosm of, the great creator or the universe or the divine, whatever you want to call it, we can see in these myths a correlation with how we can also create, right? So those creation myths where the deity is speaking creation into existence show us that we can use our own voices as well to create. So we have two creative energy centers in the body, and one of these is the sacral chakra. It's located a few inches below the navel. This energy center is really, when I think of it more as like the physical, the bodily, the animalistic energy of creation. It's raw creative power that really we can tap into there. And then we have the throat chakra. Now this is also a center of creation, but it's quite a bit different when we think about it. This creation is more creation on a spiritual level. But the thing is they both work together. So they're both operating at the same time. Now the sacral chakra has to do with the water element and flowing energy. I've talked about this before. Whereas the throat chakra is associated with the element of ether. We're going to get into that in a moment. Sometimes called akasha, that is the word in Sanskrit. And as witches, we would probably call this the fifth element of spirit. Now, we'll talk about the throat chakra more in a future episode. There's a whole episode coming just on that, but I want to spend some time now talking about that element of ether that goes with the throat chakra, how we can use it, and how it really correlates with our own element of spirit that many witches will use in their practice. So whether we call it spirit, ether, akasha, it is an animating force that we find in all of life. It transcends all of the other elements. Depending on the system that you've studied in, there's some systems that actually say it's not necessarily a hierarchy above the other elements, but that it brought the other elements into being. And it takes that spirit element to actually bring the other elements into our physical plane. So, some would even say it helps to create them. Now, ether or spirit helps us make things manifest. So when we think about creation, we think about putting everything, taking the elements and putting them together to create something here in the physical plane. Ether or spirit is what allows us to do this. We use that element's energy to draw in things out of the etheric plane, which is where magic, rituals, all spell casting, all of our magical workings takes place in that etheric plane. So we use that element of ether to help us draw those things out of the etheric plane and into the physical space where they make themselves manifest through the other four elements. So it's kind of interesting. I'm just going to hold this up. I hope we can see it. And actually, let's see. So if we look at this drawing of the pentagram here, we can see all the other elements laid here at the points of the star, and we see the spirit element at the very top. So this suggests to us that there is something of it drawing down energy into the other elements. Our powers of manifestation actually depend on this element of spirit. But the thing that's very interesting is that we rarely spend much time talking about it. So even in my own trying to find things to share with the group this week, because our theme is the element of spirit, there's very little out there on other pages and other groups about this element. There's tons about fire, water, air, and earth, but there's very little about spirit. So it really makes us kind of wonder why, and I'm going to get into some of my theories of why I think so. But today we're going to talk about, this often forgotten element when we're working with the other elements. Now, some traditions actually recognize only four elements. So there are some traditions that don't really accept the fifth element of spirit. My particular tradition does, and many do, and so that's why I'm talking about it today. We do see in several other systems, so for example, the system of Chinese medicine, there is a 5-element system. Now these elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and I've tried my best to correlate them with the chakra system or with the kind of traditional magical Western system. And it works. It's a little bit, you can kind of fit them in and see which one goes where. But the important part is there are these 5 elements. Now, in Ayurveda, in the chakra system, as I've mentioned before, there's also the 5-element system. So we have the fire, water, air, earth, and then ether or akasha. And like I said, some witches will also use the 5th element, sometimes calling it ether, sometimes calling it akasha, but often calling it spirit. Now, the thing that's interesting is I've actually heard people say that the 5th element is a new addition to the magical system. And while it is true that original magical systems that kind of date back to maybe 100 years or so didn't really have it, we do know at least that the ancient Greeks were thinking about it. So it's not like this came out of nowhere in these elemental systems. So the ancient Greeks had the elements of fire, water, air, and earth, but they knew that there was something missing. And they also were a culture that was very close to the gods, and so they knew that this 5th element that was missing from their system was different. It was different than the other 4. So they actually termed it ether first, I believe, and they spelled it with an A-E-T-H-E-R, and it actually translated to upper air. So it was thought that this was the air in the celestial environment that the gods breathed in. So it was like higher air. And they believed that this air was what animated all of the rest of everything in existence. So very, very similar to the way that a modern witch might think of the element of spirit. Now, besides its role in manifestation, spirit as the 5th element also helps to keep the other elements in balance. So one of the reasons I think that a lot of people don't talk about it, either they don't really observe it as an element or practice with it, or they're not really sure how to work with it. And one of the things it can do is if we're aware of it and we work with it, it helps us to balance the other elements. So we're always trying to get this balance in our life. And if we think about it, each element has such positive qualities, but it also has these qualities that are probably not so positive. So for example, earth, can become too rigid, and fire can become too destructive. Water can become too stagnant, and air could become too flighty. And so what the element of spirit does for us is it helps us to balance those and bring more peace and positivity into our personal environments. So what's interesting is that because spirit is the primary force of creation, it doesn't have the kind of polarity that the other elements have. So like I just mentioned, they each have these kind of negative connotations that can also go with them. Spirit doesn't have that. There really isn't a negative side to spirit. So spirit, works to balance the rest of them. So again, like I said, it's not really a hierarchy per se, but there is kind of a little bit of an elevation of this element. And we work with it in a different way than we would work with the other ones. Now, as I showed you, the placement of spirit in a pentacle or pentagram is at the top generally. And if we were talking about a circle, spirit is usually placed at the center. And what's interesting too is it's not thought of as a fixed point generally. It's thought of as a sphere. So above and below. So in my own tradition, when it's called, we call in the element of spirit above and below. And we cover that entire space. It is the essence that gives life to all things. It animates bodies. It is what is missing from a body that no longer has physical life within it. Some might call spirit the soul. I don't agree with that from my own experience. It is a pure energy that we use for creation, for manifestation, for balancing the rest of the energies around us. But it doesn't have the kind of complexity that a personal soul has. Rather, it's like, to me, it's a highly spiritual energy, that we can use to direct our energies into the other elements. Now, I think it's really important for us to try to differentiate this between great spirit. So some people might have heard that term great spirit before. And the great spirit and spirit element are not the same thing. So great spirit might also go by the words divine mind, great creator. I would even go so far as to say when we're using the word universe, the divine, this is it's like a non-gender, impersonal energy that is like the energy that's the essence of the universe. That is great spirit. And in some ways you could also say it's that energy that kind of branches out into the goddess and the god, and then out into all of the other various deities of the pantheons. But above that is this great divine energy. So this is not the same as the element of spirit that we might work with the other elements. So that element of spirit, on the other hand, is the underlying pattern behind all of creation and all of the other elements. It's a subtle force. It permeates everything, all creation. And in some traditions, so like I mentioned, we might use the word ether. Some might call this prana. I talked about that last week, prana as being kind of an animating force. Some traditions might call it chi. It's that kind of energy, that subtle energy that flows through everything. Spirit is the life force, that's breathed into all things. And also, a kind of a neat way to look at it too is that if you think about the equation 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 5. Some people say this is the equation of spirit. So what it shows us is that all of the other elements and basically spirit is greater than all of the other elements. So it's not just like adding the other elements up together and having a sum total. It's that plus more, and that's what that equation shows us. It's also that energy that is here before it's manifested into masculine, feminine, any of the other polarities, just that pure essence of energy. Now, what's interesting is that there are not a lot of correspondences for spirit. So in the previous episodes when I went through all the other elements, we had a whole list of like colors and scents, or herbs and oils and deities and all this that are associated with spirit or with the other elements. We don't really have as much of that with spirit. So some systems do assign planets, tools, various other things to the element of spirit, but it's not really as standardized as it is for the other elements. So you kind of, when you see that, I would, ask yourself if it really resonates with you, because there isn't really an agreed upon correspondences for this element. But what we do know is the Golden Dawn, they did attach some correspondences to spirit. These directions of above, below, and within, that comes from the Golden Dawn, and the colors of purple, violet, white, and then they also use the color orange to go along with spirit. It is transitory. It's the material between the physical and the celestial spheres, between the material and the spiritual worlds. Now, working with it is a little bit different than working with the other elements. We don't have a whole series of alignment practices that we can use. One of the best things that we can do to work with spirit is to take some time out of our daily lives, even if it's 5 minutes, and really set up a daily spiritual practice of some kind. So this could include meditation. This is a way to find spirit. It could include prayer, whatever you want to call it, rituals, quiet time, nature, anytime when you're able to go internal, or you're able to do something that draws you closer to divinity, to that energy outside of us, that helps us get into the mind frame of working with spirit. And from there, we are able to tap further into the other elements in a more efficient way, usually. So that would be my best advice, and sadly there isn't a lot of ways other than that. It's just really if you feel like you are not as close to the divine as you would like to be, as you feel like you're not as close to your own self as you would like to be, I would definitely think about a way to set up some kind of a personal spiritual practice that you're doing daily, or at least almost daily, more days than not, and see how that changes things for you, because that's really the key to tapping into the element of spirit. So I wanted to end here. Tonight's a little bit shorter. I just want to mention just a touch about Mercury retrograde. So it is on the radar. It's coming on Friday. This is being recorded on Wednesday, so 2 days to go. And sometimes people get really amped up about Mercury retrograde. It really does affect different people in different ways. I've noticed that it has a lot to do with what sign it's in, and how that is connected to the sign that your own Mercury is in your chart. It tends to have, in my experience, I can kind of see it coming, because there's like little technology blips here and there, passwords not working, accounts not logging in, people not getting emails, things like that. In my own experience, I try to send out energy that is positive, so rather than recoiling in fear of this thing or kind of worrying about it, it's much more effective if we approach it from a sense of, watchfulness, just being a little bit prepared for it, and then just trying to relax into it. When we resist anything, that's where we end up with trouble. So if we can relax into the energy that's coming, there's nothing we can do about it, it's coming. If we can relax into that energy, we have a much better experience of it, and we're more able to learn what the energy is there to teach us. So I'll probably talk more about this. I'm going to have another live tomorrow about my new membership coming, but one of the things for me is that in order to time this membership out the right way, I had to launch right now during Mercury retrograde. So I just kind of put that energy out there. Like, I realize that it's not the greatest time technology-wise, and in fact there was some little hiccups in the beginning with a PayPal link that didn't work, and I had a document that I hadn't enabled it to be shared, and all that got straightened out, thankfully. But you just kind of want to put your ducks in a row. I always back up my computer a day or two before, especially if the computer's old. and just kind of be prepared for it. And when you're communicating with people, also be aware that they're going through it too. And to me, it always is useful to pause for a moment when we're talking to people, really think about what we're saying, and that also goes along with the throat and the element of ether. But really think about what we're saying and if it's what we really mean to say, and to be more aware of how we're communicating. This is the energy that the retrograde is here to remind us about. All right, so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes. It looks like I don't have any questions here. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the new membership in case you haven't heard about it yet or you want to know some more details. So, and if you are here, you can always drop in any questions as we go about anything. So the membership is open right now until this Friday at 8:59 p.m. Pacific time, so right at midnight on East Coast. The membership is called Shadow Seekers, and it's an online membership. It's for witches, empaths, other magically and spiritually inclined people, really to find a deeper connection to themselves, to the divine, optimize the powers of self-healing. And what we're doing is we're going to work with shadow work and energy work to do all of this. So there is a lot that comes with the membership. It is really very cool, and I've kept the price down as low as I could, because when you see the stuff that you get, it just could not have been much lower. But we are, every month, there is a live Zoom ritual, and I'll talk in a moment about some of the themes that are coming up. Every month there is also a live Zoom workshop. Those are usually 2 weeks apart. And there's also a live office hours. So this is just me on Zoom, and people can pop in and talk about anything they want. I can help you work on anything you're working on. And if there isn't stuff that people want to talk about, I'll also just have something prepared for that day. And there's also a series of alignment practices every month. This could vary. Sometimes breath work or meditation or Kundalini energy exercises, sometimes a little bit of yoga, things that I just think will help you with your shadow work and energy work journey. And a lot of these practices, by the way, are things that I used in my own journey to help me get through it, because of those who've done shadow work know it's not easy work. It's very rewarding, it's alchemical, it's transformative, it's definitely worth it. But it's tough work, and so these practices are there to help you, get through that in a better way. And I will tell you, some of these practices I'm going to be giving in the membership. These are things that I don't know what I would have done without them, in order to get through some very, very difficult and traumatic times over the last few years. In addition to all that, there's a Facebook group that's just for the membership, and there's this community aspect of it as well that you can use as much or as little of as you want. But I think the community aspect's really important. And there's more than that, but that's some of it. Now, the membership costs $25 a month. So like I said, I kept it as low as I could. I know that times are tough for people, but you see, this is a lot of time that you're getting, to do some work, and the group is going to be quite small, our first round. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. This is a founding members launch, though, so we're keeping the group purposely small, and it's really a unique experience to get in there and be able to work with me and in just a small group setting, and you get more of me to go around during this, this beginning part. So the schedule, the way this works, I have a few things kind of set up because we needed a place to begin, and then from there the group will help direct us in the direction we go, and we'll be kind of voting on topics for the next month. But at least for our first couple of months, I have some things planned out. So our first meeting is actually on September 10th. That's next Saturday, and that is an intro to shadow work, and it's kind of for the new members to get to know each other. And we're also going to be doing a shadow work session, group session together, which is going to be really, really cool. And then on the 24th is our ritual, and that is a ritual with Kali. It's called Burn Away Your Fears. And then October, we have a workshop on soul theory, pagans in the afterlife. It's very appropriate right before Samhain. And then we have a ritual a couple weeks later. We're going to do that right near Samhain on the dark moon. It's Inanna's descent into the underworld. And then November, this one I'm really excited about. This is, there's a workshop on Chiron, how to use your astrological chart to find the wounded healer. And, you know, if we can heal that wound, we increase our own abilities to heal ourselves and others. It's just very cool, cool work. And our ritual is Odin, the wisdom of being the hanged man. And then December, we have a workshop transforming negative self-talk into a personal power mantra, and we have a ritual with Ariadne, unraveling our own untruths. So that is kind of this plan for the first couple of months, and then from there, there's other things we can explore that we will kind of see where the majority of the group wants to go, but we can work with our dreams, doing some dream work, doing archetype work with shadow and light aspects of the shadow, of the archetypes, past life regression. I'm excited. We're going to do some of that, some chakra energy work, and soul contracts. I'm excited to get into. So there's a lot of stuff here. So like I said, the cost is $25 a month, and you know, you're not obligated after the first month. You can cancel, so you can try it out. It's just $25 just to try it out, get and see if it's a fit for you. You know, I've talked to people, they say I'm crazy for offering it this low, you know, because of, you know, what you're going to get. And we do plan to open, you know, the doors close on Friday. We plan to open them up again in the future. But when we do, we are raising the price, and this price of $25 is at least, it's less than half of what this will eventually be. So in some people I've actually talked to have similar memberships where it's upwards of close to $100. So it is a really, really good deal that you are getting. And the cool thing is, like I said, it's a small group in the beginning. So it's a lot of, you know, space to work with each other and with me. And the cool thing is too, is that you lock in this price. This is never going up for you. You keep this price as long as you stay a member. And when the doors open and there's new benefits that come with those higher price levels, when we unveil those and unroll it, you get all those benefits, but you still keep that $25 price. So it's just a good deal all around, and you get to help me shape the membership and kind of have a say in what goes on. And so anyway, I hope that you will join me. We've already got we have several people who've signed up, and we're kind of running out of spots. So if you are in, definitely message me, or you can drop a comment underneath the video. And I will also put a link under the video with, there's a Google Doc you can go to get more information, including the PayPal link to sign up if you want to. But there's an FAQ on there. And I'll be live tomorrow, just going over a few more things. So anyway, I'm going to say goodnight for now. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about the spirit element. All right. Blessed be. Until next time.